it was interesting being in college at that time. Every year was pretty much different. It was like my first year, you have COVID hits, and then NIL, and then, every year since NIL's been admitted, there's been a new thing every year. Even when the NBA was in the conversation, I still had in the back of my mind, the average career really is only 3 to 5 years. I never wanted to be somebody who's just kind of like sitting on there, sitting on that short-term success there and then not having anywhere to go after. My last year kind of opened me up to all the opportunities you're afforded to as a fairly successful athlete, and how many people want to talk to you, how many doors you get let in. And once I left Stanford, I didn't want any of those doors, those networks, those people I connected with to kind of go away. It's been like controlling my autonomy a bit more in terms of like I'm reaching out to companies that I feel can help me with my performance on the court. The main stuff I look at, it's all in the movement data right now, because I've looked at some studies and things, and it's like we're pretty close to knowing when a significant injury is bound to happen.
Hello, and welcome to the Sports Pundit Performance Podcast in association with award-winning sports technology and innovation company Genius Sports. In this 5-part series, I aim to speak to the people that sit at the unique intersection between the boardroom and the dressing room, providing practical insights regardless of which side of the line you're on.
On today's episode of the Sports Pundit Performance Podcast, I was joined by Spencer Jones of the Denver Nuggets. On a 2-way contract with the Grand Rapids Gold of the NBA G League, Spencer has continually beat the odds. From being a last-minute addition to Stanford to captaining the team for 3 seasons, and initially going undrafted, only to now find himself playing in the NBA. What's most interesting about Spencer is how he continually applies himself both on and off the court. From being one of the very few NBA players active on LinkedIn, which actually helped lead to this conversation, to engaging with startups, particularly in the human performance space. Filling in on this episode for Rich, I do my best to address the conversation from a performance lens. However, I also took an interest in how he thinks about investing and leveraging his position as a professional athlete. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Spencer Jones.
Data collection, coaching software, tracking, officiating. So much technology, so little efficiency. But what if one intelligent system could do it all and unlock the full potential of your league's data and video? That's where Genius Sports comes in. From the Premier League to the NBA, leagues all over the world are deploying AI-powered Genius technology to capture and analyze data. To streamline operations, create richer performance insights, automate officiating, and power more immersive, data-driven broadcasts. Discover the new operating system for sport, brought to you by the world leader in AI and sports data. Learn more at www.geniussports.com/perform.
Spencer, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I massively appreciate it. Maybe we could start with a little bit of background, how you got to where you are today and your journey for those that aren't as familiar.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Just a little bit of background for me. I'm going into my second year at the Denver Nuggets. Graduated from Stanford, and obviously played basketball for probably about 15 years, maybe a little bit longer of my life at this point. Yeah, it was an interesting kind of journey through it all. A lot of, being underrated and kind of having to build myself up from not the best of starting positions for many people. Like, for example, kind of how I got to Stanford was, I was an underrated recruit in high school, and then kind of didn't get that Stanford offer until like a month before I graduated from high school, and actually ended up being like one of the last people admitted into the school because of that. And because, being an athlete and you get the pull from the coaches, they were actually able to extend the admissions, just let me in. And so, luckily got there. And it was definitely a place I wanted to be, just because, at that point, like I said, I was underrated. So I wasn't betting on, making a professional career out of this. And so I was just really wanted to use the sport to get me into a great school and set me up afterwards. And that was kind of the plan going into my first 2 years. And I come from a background with health, both my grandfather and father were both physicians. And so I looked at going into something like that, but then ended up grinding and starting. My first year played really well. Then you have like the agents hitting you up and stuff like that. And so, after the second year, it kind of looks like a real possibility. So I switched majors, still stayed within like engineering and stuff like that, but switched it there, and then played out the rest of the 3 years. Kind of, it was interesting being in college at that time. Every year was pretty much different. It was my first year, you have COVID hits, and then NIL. And then, every year since NIL's been admitted, there's been a new thing every year. And then once again, in a bit of an underrated position, I would go undrafted after graduating college and then, find my way to the Denver Nuggets, end up playing well enough for them to re-sign me for another year. And that's where I'm at now.
That feels like a common theme in terms of that being underrated. Do you kind of thrive on that position of kind of being an underdog and having to work harder for it?
Yeah, no, it's definitely helped me through my career, not taking things for granted, how to stack days, and honestly just, learn how to be much more process oriented than results, because, the results weren't there for a long time. And then all of a sudden, all it takes is, kind of one of these two moments to kind of springboard you to where you were. College was like one tournament that I played in AAU, springboarded me to get a lot of offers. And then kind of similarly with getting the NBA, a couple workouts went well here. They were, impressed and stuff like that. And so that's kind of how I ended up there. And so it's just kind of doing all those things beforehand to kind of set you up for those positions. It's just kind of the daily grind.
Your time at Stanford, I think I read you got the 3-point record. You were captain for 3 of the years. So it wasn't like you were completely under the radar while you were playing college sports. Like you must have been doing a lot of stuff right as well.
Yeah. I had definitely a lot of individual success. It was the team success kind of that led us, led me at least to being a little bit under the radar. But I don't take for granted any of the years. It was a great time, and it was definitely interesting just to learn from all the chaos that was going on.
Yeah, and like you said, I guess not taking for granted that there was a pro career ahead of you when you were leaving high school. Like you ended up going to one of the most respected universities in the world. You ended up getting a very respectable degree in terms of the major that you chose to do. It wasn't like you were just there to get the minimum mark so you could play sports. And then it feels like that's still kind of reflected in the way that you approach things now that you have gone pro, in terms of putting out a lot of content on LinkedIn, being very thoughtful about how you approach things, like advising, and we can get into this in more detail, like advising startups, doing internships with like health companies while you're at uni. It feels like you've always put a lot of effort into being well-rounded and having a lot of options.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've never been the kind of guy who likes to put all the eggs in one basket, but it was that on top of, I just wanted to get everything out of the position I was in. I knew, how lucky you are to be at a place like Stanford that gives you everything in terms of being an athlete. Like you're playing against UCLA, USC's, you're playing against top tier talent while also getting, that education that's on par with the Ivy League schools that, don't do that same thing. And so for me, it was getting everything out of it. Like I said, the first 2 years, I wasn't really even thinking that much about the NBA. It was just, let me try to do the best I can on the court. And then, like I said, get a respectable degree in something that can really set me going forward. And then even when the NBA was in the conversation, I mean, I still had in the back of my mind, the average career really is only 3 to 5 years. And don't get me wrong, you can make a lot of capital and a lot of money within that time that can set you up for life, but still it's only 3 to 5 years. You got to have something after that. I never wanted to be somebody who's just kind of like sitting on there, sitting on that short-term success there and then not having anywhere to go after. And so that was something I really, really wanted to get into. And really, my last year kind of opened me up to all the opportunities you're afforded to as a fairly successful athlete, and how many people want to talk to you, how many doors you get let in. And once I left Stanford, I didn't want any of those doors, those networks, those people I connected with to kind of go away as I was playing. Because I mean, every athlete will tell you this, like as soon as you stop playing, a couple of those doors start closing and you have a little less interest coming to you. And so I wanted to not be the person who's like forgets about everything I built while I was at Stanford, goes through this career, that 5 to 10 year career, and then try to come back without having built anything during that time. And so that's kind of what I've been doing now.
I think it's a really smart approach. And like, I think generally speaking, from the perspective of working with European athletes, like there is a much more commonly accepted mindset in the US where athletes are thinking about things like investing and thinking about how they can leverage the networks like you talked about. Yeah. And I wonder if some of that potentially comes from the fact that the sports system over there is set up with people going through college. And so you're a little bit more mature by the time you reach professional sport, whereas like a Premier League footballer, for instance, has probably stopped going to kind of full-time education from the age of 16.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely that, the maturity level, but then also just how much business comes to you now, especially now with NIL, how much business comes to you through playing that sports early, you get introduced to contracts. And then, even if the athletes aren't taking the college classroom as seriously maybe as they should be, they're still learning a bunch of things just through the fact of their branding, and all these companies are going to reach out to them and how to navigate that. They're going to be learning unconsciously about all that stuff. And then that kind of develops into then they start seeing how much money you can make outside of just the sport itself. And that's really where all mine started. I mean, you go to a place like Stanford and you got people building companies, dropping out, and then, going to build these multi-million-dollar companies and stuff like that. You get looked at the startup ecosystem, and you're like, growing up, you're like, you didn't know too many occupations that made more than the professional athlete. And then, like I said, you get to Stanford, you get in the startup community, you realize all these founders, once they sell their company or it grows to, unimaginable heights, these people are making even more money. And so you see all the different pathways to success. And I think that's where it's coming from now, especially with the introduction to NIL. Athletes in America are seeing different pathways that, takes a little bit of the stress off of making it as an athlete and all the other opportunities that come with it. And so I think that's a big part of it.
How have you seen that evolve over the time that you were at Stanford, and how much kind of advice or guidance is given to you officially? And then how much of that do you have to kind of go and seek out yourself, and what resources are you kind of looking at when you're trying to understand that space? Because it's pretty hard to keep up with for anyone, right? Let alone someone that's also trying to play basketball to a really high level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you had the frameworks there at Stanford. I mean, and you had, a lot of these, we would have a bunch of tech founders and, VC guys just show up and be honorary captains for our games. And you always had them to talk to during practice and stuff like that. And so it was very easy to build out that network there to where it was look, when you had a question about this, you had someone to reach out to. I mean, you still had to do it on your own. And that was a valuable lesson on, not being afraid to just reach out, just ask them questions, everything like that. Because a lot of them just enjoy just the blunt directness of that. And so that really helped me in terms of, and honestly, I still use a lot of those connections today to kind of help me evaluate the startups and opportunities in terms of, getting a better feel for the people, the opportunity, where things are going. And it's been an invaluable resource for me and kind of how I've approached my investing. But it was an interesting 5 years at Stanford. Every year changed. Like I said, it was first year, it was my only real normal year in college basketball. And even then it ended early because of COVID during our conference tournament. And then the next year next 2 years, really for us, you had COVID, and we were in the strictest county in America in terms of we had to take 10 COVID tests a day. We ended up playing half of our season in the Warriors G League arena about an hour away, just because it was, I don't know, it was the rules on campus wouldn't allow us to play inside even there. So those 2 years were kind of hectic. And then, right after that, you get NIL. And, Stanford was a little slow to kind of bring it in just because, they have a much larger brand to protect. And so they got to make sure they're doing things the right way. So we had it, I think it was my senior year where we did it evenly. And then that last year was kind of more the template you see now where guys are paid, according to market. And, even then, it was definitely a decision for me after my senior year. A couple options, whether to go pro that year, stay for that COVID year I was given, or go somewhere else to a different school and make, a little bit more money than I was able to make it at Stanford. I still got plenty 6 figures, but I knew I was paid under market value. But like I said, there were so many invaluable resources that have already proved to be worth that investment of staying that last year.
Yeah, I guess you've referenced it a few times, the alumni network that you're getting at Stanford, and particularly as captain of the basketball team at Stanford, I can imagine is probably the smart longer term play in terms of building that loyalty and trust and network connection with that Stanford alumni is probably better than maybe trading that for a small amount of additional capital in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, now that I have, more capital after being in the NBA and stuff like that to actually, put some money into significant companies and stuff like that, I get a lot of my deal flow comes from that network. And like I said, a lot of my vetting comes from people. I mean, when I do a little bit of angel investing, and when you're doing, angel investing, it's not much on the financials you can really get or trust from the companies, just because, most of it's projections. So then you really just rely on the people. And, what I started realizing is once you get in with a decent amount of companies, you realize kind of the VC startup network's pretty small in terms of people have an idea of everybody who's real movers in the space. And so that's been great in terms of just getting to know the people, knowing who to trust, who to follow and stuff like that. So that's been definitely a leg up in terms of helping me start, without making those kind of, crucial mistakes that people make. And I know like I know a decent amount of athletes kind of, stay away from VC at least early on in their investing, just because like you hear about a lot of guys, part of the reason they go broke is they're throwing money at, a lot of these companies and startups that maybe their friends make or somebody introduced them to, and they didn't do quite, the vetting, and, they pretty much just threw their money at something that had no return, and they kind of lost it there. And so, it's definitely something that's given me a lot of confidence, investing in this space.
Data collection, coaching software, tracking, officiating. So much technology, so little efficiency. But what if one intelligent system could do it all and unlock the full potential of your league's data and video? That's where Genius Sports comes in. From the Premier League to the NBA, leagues all over the world are deploying AI-powered Genius technology to capture and analyze data. To streamline operations, create richer performance insights, automate officiating, and power more immersive, data-driven broadcasts. Discover the new operating system for sport, brought to you by the world leader in AI and sports data. Learn more at www.geniussports.com/perform.
And in terms of the area you're looking to invest, has it largely been kind of sports performance related, where you feel like you can add the most direct kind of feedback and value to the companies?
Yeah, that's been largely like a branding play as well as an interest. I mean, I've always been interested in, like I said, I've always been interested in health and medicine and, being an athlete. That's right where it mixes in. So that's been most of like a branding and educational play for me in terms of like, that's where I can, like you said, be involved most in the companies. And right now with my early investments, I like to be involved with them in terms of, I love being in product development where I have companies send me their product, their new iterations of it. I get to test it, give them feedback, and then kind of be in those meetings where they're talking about things and kind of get a sense of how everything works, building my business acumen for possibly positioning myself to either create my own thing or join one of these companies I'm really interested in after it's all said and done. And so that's why, and a big emphasis has been, especially with the angel investing, is in the sports and health tech space.
And have you found like there's that to be sort of transferable skills from what you're doing off court that you've then been able to take through to your performance on the court?
Yeah, no, it's actually gone very well in terms of I'll have like these now that I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and my staff, both, my performance strength staff as well as the training staff with like trainers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have conversations about the companies we're looking into. I mean, they'll see that I've been partnering with a company that they've been talking to, and they just want to know how my experiences have been. With one of them specifically, I'm like kind of being the guinea pig for the team and seeing how this product works, and they're going to be looking at my data as well as me, and kind of seeing if this could be onboarded onto the team. And so it's definitely been cool kind of to see them kind of support what I'm doing. And they'll often ask me like, hey, what's new in the space, what's going on. I mean, they definitely respect the whole Stanford degree and everything. And so it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty cool. And then also part of it has been it's been like controlling my autonomy a bit more, like in terms of like I'm reaching out to companies that I feel like can help me with my performance on the court. Like a lot of these companies, like I said, we're in the age of data and AI these days, and what's going to become a problem for players coming in is controlling your data, having privacy with that data, because I mean, we have all these, we already use a lot of tech that tracks a bunch of our data, how we move, then can also do predictive analysis on injuries and stuff like that. And all that data is being used for decisions in the front office. I mean, but we are largely unaware of that. So it's kind of a thing for me to kind of like, take that step to being proactive, working with companies and get me more accurate data on my body, on myself, rather than waiting for them to get integrated into our Players Association or the NBA and go through that long 1 or 2 year process before then players can use it. I mean, we have, this marketability that can get us in with these companies much faster, and we don't have to go through all these regulations if we just want to try it. And all that just allows me to get a lot more data on my body, let me know all the things I need to know before anybody else knows about it, and how to, and how to kind of control everybody else kind of knowing about those things, or, taking preventive measures before they become a problem or something like that. So
yeah,
it's kind of the main reason I like to be in that.
Is there specific data that you're collecting that you're particularly interested in? Like, what metrics are you looking at most? And is there anything that you're looking at that maybe the team isn't yet as interested in, but you think is maybe going to become more important?
The main stuff I look at, I mean, it's all in the movement data right now because, like, I've looked at some studies and things, and it's like we're like pretty close to knowing like when a significant injury is bound to happen. Like your movement pattern is like in like the last. They do this with some injuries. I forget exactly which ones, but it's like the last 5 to 10 minutes before an injury has happened. It's your movement is like significantly and consistently different than what it has been the rest of the prior in that game. And so, movement patterns are huge in terms like that. And then like until we get to a point to where like we can track movement patterns and then seamlessly, update a training staff or somebody almost, immediately to be able to prevent that. That's where hopefully, tech can move. But on top of that, it's just for me, it's like using products that give me better analysis of my movement patterns and my imbalances and things like that. And then use that data analysis for what parts of my body do I need to be focusing on in terms of, when I'm in the training room, or, what kind of rehab or prehab, I should say, do I need to be focusing on in order to prevent those significant injuries? So for me, it's like we're looking at the same thing. It's just the fact that, like I said, I can get in with some of these companies that haven't been approved yet by our big organizations. I can use them before the team gets a hold of them, and so like the data I'm getting is a little bit more precise and a little bit better. And I can because like now with AI, everything's advancing so rapidly. Like this is kind of how to do it to keep a leg up. These days, I'm trying to think anything different. I mean, like I said, it's all we're all in the same space. It's just like who's adapting faster, and it's kind of we're in the age of kind of like we know the tech that's out there. It's like who's going to consolidate it first to where you can have all these predictive analyses, but can you have an entity that feeds the AI all this information on how we eat, how we recover, how we're working in the moments, and we have all these in separate entities, but we need something to consolidate it all, feed it to the AI, and then it can give you really. Then that's really where we can take off in terms of making us the most efficient athletes we can. But yeah, I mean, other than that, one thing I've been trying to do in terms of optimizing recovery, I mean, there's so many products that help, with like modalities, and you got like your cold tub, hot tub, deep tissue, BFR, which is blood flow restriction stuff. But that's like third tier of recovery. It's like, trainers will always tell you like the most two important things, sleep, eating, and then it's all that stuff. And that's where all that stuff is. And I mean, for the most part, we optimize nutrition in terms of like, especially when you get to the NBA, you can really track what you're eating and you kind of know supplements you need to take, and you can do all these blood tests and stuff like that that can give you that. So that's pretty much optimized to, I mean, it could get a little better, but it's almost to its, full potential. The biggest thing for me is like, where can we improve on like sleep? And this is very important in the NBA because our schedule is insane. Like, I mean, our schedule is optimized for TV ratings. It's not optimized for, players getting their sleep and recovering and stuff like that. I mean, through the playoffs, we only got, because we went in 7-game series, we only had 1 day of rest in between for basically all the games. And a lot of those games we're coming back 1, 2 a.m. And, so if you're a young guy, you got to get up a little bit in the morning to do a light workout or something like that. And so like you're kind of screwed on sleep, and you're not going to have a consistent sleep schedule that they keep preaching, go to bed at the same time and do all that stuff. So it's like, I guess what I'm looking for is like, you have these ways, you're coming out with companies that can track your REM sleep and all the other factors of your sleep. But I'm looking for, there's starting to be a push to where like, all right, can we track it now? Can we manipulate it in some way or track it more precisely to kind of see like, look, how can we, with what we're given in our parameters of sleep and stuff like that, how can we maximize it? And that's kind of something I've been looking at more so, just because, it's kind of like the last piece of the recovery puzzle that has still been slow to evolve.
Yeah. And to your point, like a lot of the bigger kind of things that you could do to optimize around sleep are things out of your control in terms of scheduling. Are there certain things moving through to professional basketball? Has that kind of emphasis on sleep become more apparent? Like, because I guess college games were still being televised, but you were probably playing in a smaller region, right? So maybe like not the time zone and travel demands as with the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is like, I mean, some colleges these days, now that it's, these conferences are going crazy. I know now Stanford is playing mostly East Coast schools in the ACC and stuff like that. I'm really happy I left before we started doing that, just in terms of sleeps. But yeah, no, the biggest thing is like you could have colleges, like it's much more structured in terms of like, for example, especially when you hit conference play, which is 2/3 of your season, you're playing on, at least for us, it was like Thursday, Saturday, Thursday, Sunday. Like you knew the days you were playing and you could prepare around that, stuff like that. NBA, I mean, you got back-to-backs. You could have we've had 5 games in 7 days at some points and stuff like that. So it's all crazy, and it's obviously twice as long. And so it's definitely much, much, much harder to work around. There is a huge emphasis about it, but then at the same time, like, players, like, you don't get too much off time. So like, and I guess a lot of guys are already like, we're already getting in at 2, 3 a.m. Like our time's already screwed. And then, also like, the NBA is a lot of pressure for a lot of guys, and they need their ways to kind of, get away from it and do that. And sometimes that is often prioritized over sleep, just because like, it's just how it is. You're not unable to get great sleep. So then we're so heavy on all these modalities and making sure we get nutrition. We're so heavy on these other 2 parts, just because we know like this first and probably most important part about recovery is screwed.
Yeah. You mentioned as well, like sometimes the younger guys need to do early gym sessions, which I guess is kind of like counterintuitive in some ways, in terms of like, it's obviously there to try and improve your performance, but at the same time, it's maybe one part of the system not necessarily fully talking to the other part of the system.
Yeah. And I mean, for the most part, like part of that reason for those workouts is because our minutes are pretty limited in the games and stuff like that. But despite that, we're going through pretty similar wear and tear on the body, just because, if you're not consistently playing, you'll have a workout in the morning, you'll have a workout pretty much a few hours before the game and stuff like that. Then you're sitting through the entire game. And like I said, then you have to get up for another workout tomorrow morning. So like you're getting a similar load there, but yeah, it's not always treated the exact same and stuff like that. So it's definitely something to navigate as a young guy. Just because you aren't playing does not mean your body's necessarily feeling as fresh, and you kind of got to learn how to navigate that.
Yeah. So what do you think's next for you? Because I appreciate we're kind of coming up to time. So what do you think's next for you in terms of like, what's the hopeful kind of plan? I guess it's difficult for you to look too far ahead, but
yeah. I'm still not on like long-term deal or anything like that. So like for me, I mean, and always while I'm playing, it's going to be playing is the biggest thing. I'll definitely have more opportunity this year and everything. So that'd be exciting, and just optimizing what I can do on the court there and making sure that stays the main thing. But off the court now is, getting, like I said, going into second year, another year with great NBA money and stuff like that. So it's, kind of differentiating my investments a little bit, looking into different areas, and then also just keep going with kind of what I'm doing, building that LinkedIn brand a little bit, maintain working with a lot of these health tech companies and stuff like that. And then, now I'm at the position where like I can, pick and choose kind of who I want to work with and everything like that, and just building my relationship with those, and kind of just picking the main ones I want to stay with, learning as much as I can through the space, and just kind of keep going from there. I mean, I kind of have everything set to where I want it. Now it's just kind of seeing where it kind of takes me.
Yeah, it's super exciting. And I think you have put yourself in an incredible position, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye out to see how you get on. And if there's anything I can do to help with any introductions to anyone or any advice, then I'm more than happy to try and help.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate that.
Thank you for listening. I'll include more info about the guest and the topics covered in the show notes. Visit sportspundit.co to find previous editions of the podcast, access the newsletter, and sign up for our WhatsApp group to see upcoming social events in cities around the world. See you again soon.